said, I'm going this year just in case. And so last year, I had a wonderful time at the Shepherd's Conference. True story. Open your Bibles, if you have them with you, to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5. And I'll share with you the message that Dr. MacArthur asked me to bring, talking about our leadership in our homes. This is a seminal issue. You know, it's interesting. Several months ago, we watched a tragedy unfold at Penn State University, where an icon, a hero, Joe Paterno, saw everything that he had worked and lived for more than 4 decades disintegrate right before his eyes. And although, if you look at his death certificate, it will say that he died of cancer, I don't think anyone would argue that what happened to him had nothing to do with it. The fact of the matter is, it had to contribute to the abrupt ending of the man's life. And what's astonishing about it is how quickly it happened and how absolute the response was. A man in his position should have known better, should have done more, should have, just an absolute line in the sand. You are disqualified. He lost his position, as many would in our day and age. But how many of us believe that had he been discovered to be an adulterer, or an abusive husband, or a derelict father, or an absentee father, or an abusive father, at Penn State would have said, you're disqualified. In fact, there is no profession in our culture wherein a man would be disqualified because of his failures as a husband and a father, except one, and that's ours. Doctors, lawyers, coaches, judges. There's a man running for president right now who's on his 3rd wife. And regardless of your politics, the point I'm making is it's not a disqualifier. But for us, it is. We are held to a different standard. But the question is, why? Well, before we get to that, here's what I've been pondering. Not only are we unique in the fact that being derelict in those responsibilities would be a disqualifier, and that separates us from everyone else in our culture. Everyone else in our culture. There's no one who's held to that standard. But it's even more significant than that. Not only is it a disqualifier if we live our lives in that way, but biblically it is a qualifier for us to be exemplary as husbands and as fathers. So not only on the negative side can we not just fail miserably in that area and expect to stay in the positions that we have, but from a biblical perspective, in order to enter into these positions that we have, according to Titus chapter 1 and verse 6, and according to 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, we're qualified for our positions based upon being exemplary husbands and exemplary fathers. Did I say perfect? Absolutely not. You can't be an example if you're a perfect husband. Pastor, can you just help me? I'm struggling with what to do. I blew it with my wife, and I want to make that right. Can you help me with that? Wow, I really wish I could, but I have no idea what that looks like. Pastor, can you just pray for me? Because my son, I don't think he's going to make it. Is it a terminal illness? No, but I don't think he's going to make it. Can I cannot comprehend being that angry with a child, but I'll try to pray for you. Not perfect, but exemplary. Again, the question is, why? Does God just throw this standard out there? Absolutely not. And I believe if we understand this picture here in the book of Ephesians, we'll understand the significance of the marriage relationship in general, and the family in general, but also why it is so significant for us. In order to understand this, I want us to look briefly at this letter more carefully. Because what I'm going to argue is that the reason that this is so important for us, not only a disqualifier but a qualifier, is because of the gospel. Not because the family is so important in and of itself, and the family is important in and of itself. But the government's important too, in and of itself. But it's important because of the gospel. This is about the gospel. This is one of the many implications of the gospel. This is a picture of the gospel. That is why this is a non-negotiable for us. Now, not just because families are in trouble in our day, and families are in trouble in our day, but everybody's in trouble in our day. Families have always been in trouble. I see so many dysfunctional families around me. Really? You do? Because as far as my theology goes, there's only been one non-dysfunctional family in the history of the world, and they're the family that invented dysfunction. To understand Ephesians chapter 5, we have to understand Ephesians. This book divided perfectly in half. The first 3 chapters of the book are about orthodoxy, the last 3 about orthopraxy. The first 3 about right believing, the last 3 about right behaving. The first 3 about our calling, the last 3 about our conduct. The first 3 about the indicatives, and the last 3 about the imperatives. And we must grasp that if we're going to understand the book of Ephesians. We have to understand the difference between the indicatives. The indicatives, what Christ has accomplished on our behalf to his Father's glory through the cross. That's what we find in the first half of the book. What Christ has accomplished on our behalf to the Father's glory through the cross. Those are the indicatives. That's who and what we are. In the second half, we see the imperatives. And the imperatives are how we are called and empowered and motivated to live as a direct result of the person and work of Christ. So on one hand, we see who we are. In the second half, we see who we're called, enabled, empowered, and motivated to be. And if we disjoin these two,